Welcome back to another one of my videos. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of my favorite dinners, which is schnitzel. So if you want to see how I make my schnitzel, keep watching the video. Now for the breading, we need three components. We need our egg mixture, our flour mixture, and of course our breadcrumbs. So for the egg mixture, I'm going to use 4 eggs and 4 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. For our flour mixture, I'm using 200 grams of flour, 1 tablespoon each of seasoning salt and paprika, and 1 teaspoon of fresh ground black pepper. And then for the breadcrumbs, honestly, I don't even know how much I use. I do use a lot. It always depends on how many schnitzels I make. But I would say at least get a big tin like this. So this is like 500 grams or just under 500 grams. You probably won't need all of it, but better safe than sorry. Now, I usually like using these Pyrex tins because they're a nice size and it usually fits like all of the schnitzels that I make size-wise. You can also use like a tupper or like a round soup bowl that's just kind of has like a bit of a higher rim. That makes it just a little bit less messy. But all we're going to do is add our flour with our spices. And I'm just gonna give this one quick mix to make sure everything is kind of incorporated and evenly spread out. I'm gonna set this aside and we can make our egg mixture. Now, like with our flour mixture, we're just gonna add both of our ingredients into our Pyrex tin and whisk that up once to make sure all the eggs are incorporated. I'm also going to add my breadcrumbs into another tin just so I have everything prepared for when we start breading it. I'm just not going to add all of them yet just because I don't know how much I'm going to need and I don't want to waste them. So I'm just going to start with like a good layer at the bottom, so maybe like half of the tin. Now while we prepare the meat, I'm just going to add my egg mixture back into the fridge. I'm just going to set these two aside. Now I already went ahead and I cut up a pork loin. So we're making a pork schnitzel, but you can also use this with chicken or basically any meat that you have and that you want to bread. But typically you use pork. So I have about 20 pieces that are roughly 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters in thickness. And now we have to smack them until they are like 1/2 centimeter thick. Now again, if you like your schnitzels to be a little bit thicker, you don't have to smack them as thin. If you like them to be a little bit thinner, just make them a little bit thinner. The only difference it's gonna make is how long you deep fry them. So again, if they're a little bit thinner, you won't have to cook them for as long, else they get really dry. So just keep that in mind as you're smacking it and then as you cook them. Now a little trick that I have learned is get yourself a plastic bag or some plastic wrap and cut it open so you have kind of like a pocket. This will contain all of the meat and the meat juices from flying around everywhere when you smack it. So all I do is I lay one piece in the middle, close it, and then go to town. Now I also recommend using the flat side and not the one with the ruffles. Again, just personal preference. I don't actually know which side you're supposed to use. I just always use this one. Now my countertops aren't that stable, so I wouldn't want to smack 20 schnitzels on here. So what I usually do is I take a nice big wooden cutting board, put it on my lap, and then smack it that way. It's just what I prefer to do. You can do it however you like. If you have some nice stable countertops, do it on your countertops. Now without further ado, let me introduce our guest on today's episode who will help me make all of these schnitzels because I do not want to smack 20 schnitzels.
Hey.
Julian will be doing all the schnitzels and I get to do the fun part of breading. So let's get into it. We ended up having 15 schnitzels, so I'm gonna put these back into the fridge until we're ready to start breading and deep frying. Okay, it's been a couple hours and we're ready to start breading and deep frying our schnitzels. So the first thing we need to do is get our oil hot enough. Now you want to make sure you put enough oil into your pan or your pot that your schnitzel is completely submerged and it doesn't touch the bottom of your pan. So I have about like a centimeter of oil in my pan. And you also want to make sure you use an oil that has a high smoke point, such as canola oil. Now, as you fry your schnitzels, you might lose some of your oil, so you might just have to top it off every now and then to make sure you have enough oil in it. So we're going to heat up our oil to 170 or 180 degrees Celsius. You can either use a thermometer to do that. Now, if you don't have a thermometer, you can also use a wooden skewer like this one. And when you stick it into your oil, you want little bubbles to appear around your skewer. Now, while the oil is heating up behind me, I'm going to start breading some of my schnitzels. So I'm going to bread 2 schnitzels at a time because that's all I can fit into my pan. Then as soon as those 2 are done, I'm going to bread the next 2 and pop them in. That way you have a nice little chain going. So I'm also just going to take out 2 pieces of meat at a time and then put the rest back into the fridge because I just don't want this sitting out the whole time. Now to bread our schnitzels, we're simply going to first put them into our flour mixture and lightly pat that on, then drag it through our egg mixture from both sides, and then flop it into our breadcrumbs. When you put your schnitzel into the breadcrumbs, you want to make sure not to pat your breadcrumbs onto the schnitzel. If you do, it won't allow the schnitzel breading to kind of puff up and be all fluffy, which is what you want. Another tip I have for you is trying to use one hand for your dry ingredients and one hand for your egg mixture. That way it's a lot easier to handle and you don't have to wash your hands all the time and your hands don't get as gross. We're gonna cook this on each side for a few minutes until it gets golden brown, and then we're gonna flip them. Now you also wanna jiggle your pan just a little bit every now and then. That'll help fluff up your breading. These schnitzels are all done, so I'm just gonna put them onto my little drying rack here and let them drip off any of the extra oil. And now we can add the next 2 schnitzels that we just made. Now you want to make sure to put your schnitzels next to each other and not on top of each other, because that can ruin your breading. I already filled up 1 tray of schnitzel, so I'm just gonna stick these in the oven to make sure they stay warm before we eat them. You also wanna make sure to keep an eye on your oil temperature, so just throw your thermometer in there every now and then to make sure you're at the right temperature. We're down to our last schnitzel. Now the first thing I do once I'm done making my schnitzels is I'll take my oil off of the heat and just let it cool down. Now once it's cooled down, you can kind of judge yourself how dirty the oil is and if you want to reuse it or not. Usually I will reuse it at least 2 times just because I don't want to waste that much oil. So what I will do is I will strain out any of the bits of the breading that's kind of swimming in the oil, so I have a more cleaner oil, and then I'll just put it into a little jar and then I'll use that and then usually add a little bit more oil because it's usually not enough. That being said, we are all done making our schnitzels and we're ready to have some dinner. Now with my schnitzel, I also made a Jägersoße or a mushroom gravy sauce. I also steamed some peas and carrots and boiled some potatoes. Now traditionally, a schnitzel or Wiener Schnitzel would just be served with a slice of lemon and any other side. But I prefer the mushroom sauce, so I usually just put a little bit of mushroom sauce on mine. And that is our dinner served. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, you can give it a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the whole recipe is going to be in the description box as well. And let me know what your favorite toppings for schnitzel are.